Welcome to Two Souls Podcast, a podcast to shift, impact, empower, and disrupt your consciousness, ultimately allowing you to thrive in this human experience. Now here are your hosts, Amber Megenhauser and Angela Blaha. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Hi Amber, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
Great. So what can we explore today?
Today, I thought we'd talk a little bit about setting standards. How do we set standards and how do they help us?
Setting standards. Ooh, the moral compass of who we are. Like literally, that's what standards are, right? Our internal moral compass. And
Yes.
I think that I feel like for a long time, we really, have we had morals? I don't think we are at a point in our evolution as humanity that we have morals or standards. And I think that women, since we're women in particular, we can account to this. I don't believe that we have held ourselves accountable to our own standards. What do you believe?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I think that too. I think we're just, as women, we all just kind of do what we're taught instead of understanding that we can have our own standards, and our standards constantly change because we constantly change.
Right. Well, but when we do set those in, so like let's play this out, right? So let's take a standard that you have for yourself, and let's see how it works. So what's one standard that you have for yourself now today?
One standard I have for myself is that I will only be called by my proper name.
Mm. So what happens when you are not called by your proper name? Like what happens to your energy, or what happens to your mental?
I can feel like the difference in me when somebody calls me something I dislike, or a nickname, or whatever it is. I can feel how much it brings me down and how much it will change in me because of the dislike I have for it.
Mm. So what does it do to so it triggers an emotion. What emotion does it trigger?
Um I feel like there's a couple different emotions that it actually kind of triggers. Uh some of it I feel like maybe is like my past, and that's not who I am anymore. So I'm like,
Mm.
that's the old Amber, this is the new Amber, and like she don't live that life. So I
Mm.
feel like it pulls me to the past, and I don't live in the past, I live in the now.
Mm. So that's why it became important, is that you've recognized in your own self that all these changes that you've made, and now you're demanding literally that you be called who you are in this moment versus who you've been in the past, like nicknames and other names that are, not who you are right now.
Yes.
That's a name. Like there's a like I have a really hard time remembering names, and I don't know why that is. I think it's an energy, a vibration, frequency thing, because lots of names don't match the person, their energy fields. And so I can remember people's energies like none other, right? And I can remember their eyes. I can remember their features, but their names, gosh, it's just like terrible. But when you recognize within yourself um, how powerful the name becomes, like which is what you've done, right? Like you've recognized how powerful your name has become, because it lets everyone know lets everyone know, including yourself, that this is who you are. Now the vibration
Yes.
and the frequency and the name all match, right? So yeah, so that's taking back your power. It's really standing in a standard, something that you value because it recognizes, because you recognize, and the world recognizes who you are in this moment.
That makes a lot of sense. I never really looked at it as I could feel how important it was for me to have that standard, but I never really realized the whole big picture of it until you just said that.
Yeah, well, everything comes back to our own power, and which is what standards are, right? Like when we create standards for ourselves, standards are things, they're lines drawn in the sand that say, okay, this is it. I will never go below this standard ever again. And everyone around me has to rise up to this standard, including me, right? Including me, or especially me.
Yeah.
Because if I don't hold this standard, this moral value, this moral, like this is who I am in this moment, if I don't hold that, then no one else will hold that. And that is not something that we as women are ever taught. Not ever.
Yeah.
But that is very, very powerful. It's a really, really powerful. I don't believe anyone, I don't, here's the way I view the world right now is that we don't have standards. And I think that we're floundering around trying to figure out what are our standards. Like that's why we're in such disarray right now, is that we don't really have standards. And maybe we do need to upgrade our standards. And maybe that's why we're really having a hard time floundering around, not really coming up with anything new, not being the creators that we came here to be, is because we don't know our own standards. We're not rehearsed, we're not trained, we're not cultured, we're not taught to have standards. Um, as a human being or as a human race, because there's been so much manipulation, so much control, so much domination, so much unethical things that we've experienced in the last 100 years, that we don't, we're lost. We're literally lost as a race, as a human race. We're lost.
Yeah.
And when you become lost, well, there are no standards. So you either have to start creating new standards, ones that are hopefully more ethical, more free, more sovereign, more, that raise you up beyond a certain level. And I think that that's where we are. And sometimes, like you've just experienced, saying, no, this is my name, this is who I am now. Like that's a very powerful step.
And it feels powerful. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple weeks ago, I had this come up again. And this has been a standard of mine for months now. And so the minute something happens where that proper name is not used, like you can completely feel the whole shift in your body and how it can bring you down or raise you up. So having them standards definitely empowers you to your fullest potential.
Yeah. It opens doorways. It literally moves you into a different level of consciousness.
Yeah.
We always have these, and I'm going to use humanity as a whole picture, is we have these hopes and these dreams that, we're all going to treat each other, equally, and that we're going to, get rid of our biases, and we're going to actually start, we're actually going to start, like being humans. Like what makes us human? Like I've been asking myself that question for a long time now, is like, what makes us human? I mean, we're no better than animals right now, because we're just, it's just dog eat dog world out there, in my opinion. And we're not any better than the animal world, and they're just out there to survive. And I feel like that's where we are as a human race, is we've lowered ourselves to just survival. How can I survive? How can I, steal from this person, or how can I control this person to get what I want? Like, that's, in my viewpoint, that's what I see. And it could be just because that's kind of the world that I live in, but that's where
So if people
yeah, go ahead.
so if people actually set standard for themselves, it would help eliminate a lot of that, correct?
Well, yeah, because we would say, okay, I'm never going to be, let's take our own personal relationships. Those are coming into play like really strong in the cosmic field. Like, that's where the support is right now. Is, where's your standard at in your own personal relationships with your partners, or with your family, or with your friends, or with your children? Where's your moral compass at? What is it that you're not going to be messed with ever again? And, look at your relationships. Like, where are you? Like, there's a difference between conflict and abuse, right? Like, conflict, in my opinion, and I don't really enjoy conflict, but conflict, in my opinion, is very freeing, because it tells you where your standard is, right? Like, no, this is where our standard should be. Abuse is very suppressive and oppressive, and it deals in domination and control. I think that we have faulted to the abuse side. Like, that's our norm, is abusive kinds of relationships. In order to move them more into more freeing, I mean, we do have to have these kinds of conflicts that we're seeing within our world right now, because it's really making us take a step back and say, okay, look, why are we doing this? This is harming other people, and this is harming humanity as a whole. Like, why can't we just, you can have your opinion, I can have my opinion, and we still live together, right? There doesn't have to be this shame, blame, guilt that's actually happening in our world right now, which again is very abusive. It's abusive power.
Yeah.
Conflictual power is debatable, like, right? Like, it's, yeah, I'm expressing myself, you're expressing yourself, and we both have standards. Fantastic. Everybody knows where the standards are, right? Abusive power, no one knows where standards are. Nobody knows where the standards are. And that's where we are as a human race. And so we have to start looking at ourselves and say, okay, what is my power? What is my standard? When I know my standards, then I become powerful. When I'm out there lost, I have no power whatsoever. None. Because I don't know myself. I don't know any standards. I don't have a moral compass. I don't have ethical, things that I say, okay, yeah, I will not do harm. Doing no harm. Like, the world is seeing a ton of harm right now. Like, a ton of harm. It's an atrocity.
Yeah.
And nobody's doing anything about it. So we have to start looking. That's why there's this whole push to know thyself, go inward, knowing who you are. Like, it's all because we've been lost in our own standards. We've been lost, literally lost.
Just not having any type of standards. And I think that's some of it too, where people don't even realize that they don't have any standards for themselves.
Right. Yeah, we don't.
So how could people set some standards for themselves? Like, just some, like, sit with it and really think about what standard they need to bring into their life to thrive in who they are.
Well, maybe the first standard is, I'm not going to survive anymore. I'm going to thrive. I mean, it's a big standard. It's a big standard, but it is a very powerful standard as well. Right? Like, you can feel the energy of that. Like, oh, I'm just surviving. Wait, what does that mean? I'm just surviving. Well, if I don't know myself inside and out, if I don't know how my body works, if I don't know how my mind works, if I don't know how my emotions work, If I'm not constantly connected to my own higher self, then I'm probably just surviving. So
Yep.
the first step then is to say, okay, well, which one of these four, or my energy field, which is, the fifth body, then what's the first one I want to tackle? Right? If my emotions control me, I'm in survival. If my thoughts are just random thoughts and they're just like repeating patterns over and over and over, I'm in survival. If I don't know my body or how to respond to my body when it gets sick, or if it's, how to keep my immune system like at maximum capacity, or if I'm not connected to my higher self, I'm in survival. That should be the very first question, right? Is where am I only in survival at? Then the second question becomes, okay, well, which one of these do I want to tackle first? Because we can't work on every single one of them. We would override our system and we'd be crazy, right? It's too much. It's overwhelming. Yeah. So we just start with one thing.
Yeah.
And then, you dive in and you learn all about your emotions. Let's say you're going to tackle your emotional body, because in my opinion, that's one of the most important things, is to be in control of your emotions and to know what your emotions are. Right? Like when you say you're grieving or when you say you're sad, what does that really mean? Do you know? When you say you're happy, what does that really mean? Do you know? Right? Like what happens to your body when you're happy? What happens to your mind when you're happy? What happens when you're with your connection to your highest self, your God self, when you're happy or when you're sad? Right? Now you're starting to move into bringing all of your bodies together. What happens to your energy? Right? Like, do people attract to your energy then, or do people shy away? That's all due to your energy field. So that's
and you can really notice that.
Yeah, you can.
How it changes your energy.
Yes. That should be that's when I say become the mad scientist. That's when you're like looking at all of yourself and you're saying, oh, this is a place that is a trigger for me. Right? Like, so, just surviving is a trigger for me. All it does is make me unhappy. It makes me feel like the mental thoughts are just repeating patterns. My emotions are all out of whack. I feel depressed. I'm not connected to my higher self because, I just don't even take the time to do any of that kind of stuff because I'm depressed and because it's just a loop. You're just in a hamster wheel and you're just going round and round and round. Same thing all the time.
Yeah. And when you also set the standards to like surviving versus thriving, you hold yourself accountable. So you do thrive more and more every single day.
Yeah. And then you start setting more and more standards, right? Like it's because it's like you figure out where somewhere along the road, you sort of bring in the awareness that, oh yeah, that survival game is like, I don't like being lost. I don't like just surviving. I don't like having my emotions in control of me. I don't like having my thoughts be in control of me. I'm the one that's in control, me. In meditation, we have these sayings that say, you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not your body. You are your higher self. And if that becomes your standard, that you are your higher self, then all of these other things are important. Yes, the body is important because it's the vessel that carries your higher self. The thoughts are important because it's how you make sense of the world. Your emotions are important because it's how you deal with people, right? So, but they are not the things that should be in control here. Your higher self should be the one that's in control here because it's the higher self's experience. It's not the body's experience or the emotions experience. It's the higher self's experience. And when the higher self becomes the focus, the standards become very, very distinct because the higher self does not like being lost. The ego loves to be lost because then it can just be random. You can just sit on the couch and not do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you can feel the power of that, right? Like you can feel the energy shift that's within you that's now saying, oh, okay, here we have some work to do. No, we don't really have work to do. We have an experience, we have some standards to set, and then we're going to hold ourselves accountable to that standard. Then what happens is there's a
Yes.
ripple effect that starts to happen, and the entire world around you starts to notice the standard and then raises to the standard.
Everything, every vibration around you, once you raise yours, everything just follows you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because you're like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to deal with that any longer, right? And if people don't want to
Yeah.
have, move to that sort of vibration or to follow that kind of internal structure that you've created, like they'll just disappear from your life and you won't even have to, like, it'll be nothing, right? So we shouldn't
Yeah.
grieve, people not raising to the standard. We should just be the standard and say, oh, yeah, no, we're not going to do this kind of thing any longer. We're not going to move into this abusive power. I'm tired of being, in this abusive, suppressive, oppressive energy. Like it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. So
Yeah.
yeah, setting standards is, I think it's the new way of moving into that, the spiritual world talks about 5D all the time. Well, it's not going to just magically happen. I mean, humanity does have to evolve itself, and we're going to evolve through the standards, through the self actualization process.
Yeah. So, talking about the 5D, so everybody setting their standards will just help get to 5D.
Well, 5D is a theory. I mean, if we actually look at vibrations, frequencies, and energies, 5D is literally a different frequency that we're operating on. And yes, once you set those standards of, I'm going to grow my own food, for example, like that's a huge standard for me right now is growing my own food because I know what's in my own food. I know how to, prep it. I know that there's no chemicals, there's no herbicides, there's no pesticides in my own food, and that's becoming a very high, strict standard for me. So yeah, then what happens is, so when I have an abundance of it, I share it, right? And people notice, they taste the difference. You can taste the difference. And
Yep.
so it's like, hey, like this whole summer, I've had conversations about gardening with other people in my groups. And it's like, well, how do you do this? How do you grow that? Like, and all these kinds of things. And what kind of soil do you use? And, like the conversations are in depth into how to growing your own food. And so, now everybody around me is starting to grow their own food. So, yeah, we have to start,
Yeah.
you know, vibrationally, that's what gets you to 5D, 6D, 7D, and beyond. Are these, we have to start creating these sort of, no, I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to put that stuff into my body any longer because I don't really know, where it came from. I don't know who touched it. I don't know, what kind of toxins are in it. And if I grow my own, I know exactly what's happening here.
That is a perfect standard that I think everybody can relate to, because I think that society as a whole is really getting on board with the grow your own stuff because you know what's in it. There is
Mm-hmm.
so much junk out there today that is completely holding us back. And I also think that everyone that touches everything, they're also giving you their energy as well. So it's like, what
Right.
are you really getting from that? So
Right.
having a standard with food is huge.
Yeah. Well, and we're getting these pulls. Like 5D to 9D is really intense right now, and I mean it's working with the cosmic field, and it's really like that's where all the support is. So we get these pulls, right? Growing your own food is a pull right now. Being sovereign, making your own having critical thinking skills, like that's a huge pull right now. That should be a standard. get all the information, and then you make a decision about what's right for you, what's best for you. Those we get those pulls from these other dimensions or these other frequencies and patterns, and we get them, and we have to make a decision whether we're going to act upon them. And so that's where the standard becomes important, because in those decision points, you either set a standard or you don't. We're getting pulls for growing our own food, but how many of us are actually doing it, right? Because there's not been any decisions made. See, there's a huge energy shift that happens, and we've talked about this before. When you make a decision, it becomes a standard. I mean, it automatically becomes a standard. We don't even have to think about it. But we don't give credit where credit is due. So when we're out here floundering around and we made a decision to grow our own food, but yet, maybe we don't have any decisions about how that's going to happen, or who am I going to, trust and believe in dirt preparation, for example, or, the plants. Like, do I buy heirloom plants, or do I buy modern day plants, or do I, grow a pepper and then do I, save the seeds for next year? Like those kinds of things then become, we get lost in those kinds of things. And so we can automatically set a standard, but then we have to hold the standard. We have to, like say, okay, this is going to be a standard from now on, and I'm going to do it until I can't do it any longer. And then I'm going to change my standard. But we don't recognize that we have standards. And around certain groups of people, we lose our standards. Yes. Right? That whole mass mentality comes in, and we can get swayed away from our standard. So you have to be practicing your standard in order to have one. Like your name. If you're demanding that people say, yeah, no, my name is Amber, and you're going to call me Amber because that's who I am now, then, you have to practice that. You have to let everyone know who doesn't call you Amber that your name is Amber, right? I mean, and I know that you do that.
Yeah.
And so, that's part of the deal is once we have a standard, we have to actually practice the standard.
Yeah. That was a really great analogy.
Yeah, standards. We need standards. The world needs standards. Humanity needs standards. I mean,
yes.
And we need to
and our standards being the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Practice your standard. Stay strong in your standard. And your standards do change. Like, they're going to grow as you grow. I can definitely say my standards a year ago are not even close to being the same as the standards I have today.
Yes, well, that's the whole point of being energy fields. Like, that's all we are, is just an energy field, is that we change and we grow and we expand and we, learn new things and we, have new experiences. And with that should follow standards, or we should have standards, and then the experience follows the standard. But because we haven't been, practicing standards for a good 100 years or so, or longer, we're a lost race of human beings that are just floundering around trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So everybody set your standards. They will help you so much on thriving with your journey. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate all of our listeners. If there's any subject you'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out to one of us. Until next time, from our soul to yours, have a super fantastic day.